have a friend who placed a little comic strip on the front of her office door one time. It was an awesome little comic. It had two guys talking to each other, and one of them says, "Sometimes I'd like to ask God why He allows poverty and famine and injustice when He could do something about it." And the other one asks, "Well, what's stopping you?" And the other guy replies, "I'm afraid God might ask me the same question." In today's gospel passage of the multiplication of the loaves and the fishes, there's a statement that Jesus makes to His disciples that we must never forget. He says, "Give them some food yourselves." On that day, there were thousands of people there. They were hungry. They had not brought food. The disciples thought about sending them to nearby villages so that they could buy food for themselves there. But Jesus has another idea, and He surprises His disciples. He looks at those thousands of hungry people, and He turns to His disciples and He says, "Give them some food yourselves." Say what? All they have is just 2 dried fish and 5 loaves of bread. There's no way that would be enough to feed all those thousands of people. But there's a basic truth that they learned that day. And that is the truth that God feeds His people. And He chooses to use our hands. On that day, along the shores of the Sea of Galilee, Jesus guided His disciples to offer what little they had to give. And then, through His divine grace, He miraculously multiplied it, and nobody there went hungry that day. Today, in 2020, there are also people who are hungry. And Jesus is still saying, "Give them some food yourselves." And guess to whom He's saying that? He's saying it to you and me. Right now, many of us have the coronavirus on our minds every day. Seems like we can't stop talking about it or thinking about it. But do you know what is the biggest health problem in the world year in and year out? It's hunger. Think about how many people in the world have died so far from COVID-19. That number is right at about 660,000. That's a very big problem, and we all must take that very seriously. And in that same time frame, that 660,000 people have died of the coronavirus, guess how many people in the world have died from hunger? More than 5 million. That's because each year, about 9 million people in the world die from hunger. There probably aren't very many days in our lives when you or I go to bed hungry. But on any given day, 1 out of 9 people in our world go to bed hungry. So what does that have to do with us? Why should we bother ourselves by thinking about hungry people? Isn't that just their problem? Remember what Jesus teaches us in Luke chapter 10. He says, "Love your neighbor as yourself." And then He goes on and tells the parable of the Good Samaritan in order to teach us that people from other countries and other cultures are our neighbors. And we must love them as we love ourselves. And remember what Jesus says in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 25 when He's teaching us about what's going to happen at the last judgment. He says to those on His left, "Depart from me, you accursed ones, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. Whatever you did not do for one of these least ones, you did not do for me." In our Catholic faith tradition, one of the corporal works of mercy is feeding the hungry. Now, what can we do? Are we supposed to just sit here and feel guilty every time we eat a meal? No, I don't think so. We should not paralyze ourselves on a guilt trip. However, we're Christians and we live with the spirit of hope and faith and charity, and we can make some concrete steps that will make a positive difference. Let me give you some examples of things that we can do. For example, we can choose not to take food for granted. We can choose not to overeat and not to waste food. We can choose to conserve water, which makes more water available to grow more food. We can pitch in and help feed those in our local area who don't have enough food to eat, through ministries like the St. Vincent de Paul Society, Catholic Charities, Catholic Outreach, Helping Hands, and the food banks and food pantries in all of our towns. Another thing we can do is we can help to prepare and serve food at our local soup kitchens. We can also help feed the hungry in other countries around the world by contributing to Catholic Relief Services, which feeds the hungry all over the world every day. You can find them online at crs.org. That's Catholic Relief Services. Those are just a few ideas that come to me today, and you might have other ideas. Each one of us can choose to do something to bring the situation one step closer to where it ought to be. Let me share with you the words of Archbishop Oscar Romero, who was the Archbishop in San Salvador in Central America. He was murdered at the altar celebrating Mass back in 1980, already 40 years ago. He said, "We accomplished in our lifetime only a tiny fraction of the magnificent enterprise that is the Lord's work. Nothing we do is complete," which is another way of saying that the kingdom always lies beyond us. We cannot do everything, and there's a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and to do it very well. It may be incomplete, but it is a beginning, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and do the rest. Those are inspiring words, and each one of us can do something about hunger in our world. We each do our little part, and we trust in the grace of Jesus Christ to multiply our little contribution and bring results far beyond what we ever could have imagined or what we could have done on our own. Give them some food yourselves.